This is Healthy Souls with Father Nicholas Lowe, helping you to live a Christ-filled life in today's world. Father Nicholas is the pastor of St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, Florida.
We began a new sermon series a couple of weeks ago, and it's called Taking the Next Step. And the premise behind this sermon series is that every one of us, you and me alike, have areas of our life that we need to take the next step in, areas that we need to grow in. We began talking about how we need to take the next step as a society in taking care of our children, our youth. Then we started talking about how we are called to be the everybody, to go out and help the somebodies in need in our world. Last week we talked about a topic that many of us struggle with on a day-to-day basis, and that is stress. How do we need to take the next step in coping with the stress that we all go through? And today I want to continue that conversation by talking to you about something that I think every one of us struggles with in our life, and that is taking the next step to walk through the valleys of life. Wouldn't it be great if we were always on the mountaintop? If we were like little Care Bears, and we would just simply jump from one mountaintop to the next mountaintop, where there were no struggles, you didn't have a worry, never were in a bad mood, your spouse was never in a bad mood, your children were always obeying and being kind to you, that everything was just picture perfect in your life. Wouldn't that be great? But the reality is that we live in a world that has valleys, where things aren't going well. That maybe you're depressed, maybe you're going through a difficult time, maybe your marriage is not where it wants it to be. In fact, sometimes you could be in a mountaintop in the morning and be experiencing a valley in the evening. You could be having a high at work where you just got this new client, things are going great in your life, and then you come home and struggles are with your spouse. Or maybe you young people, you're having a high at school, you're getting hundreds and A's on all your papers, and then you're coming home and you're having a problem with your parents, or you feel like no one understands you. Life is filled with mountaintops and valleys. And many of us, friends, we love the mountaintops, but we are not prepared for the valleys. This past week, my heart was aching when I heard the news of a young pastor of a church out in California. He's a mega church pastor. And this young man, who's got a young family, he's got thousands and thousands of people that are under his leadership, became one of the 865 people who took their lives just this past week. He was in a valley of depression. And some of us, friends, at our own lives, we can find ourselves in a valley of sadness, in a valley of distress. And what I want you to understand is this important principle, and it's twofold. One is, if you ever find yourself where your marriage is not where it needs to be, where you as an individual are not where you need to be, do not travel that on your own. Don't wait till the house is burnt down to call Father Nick and say, I need help to rebuild the house. No, call now. Get the help that you need. There are ways to deal with struggles and depression in your life. But number two is this, is that yes, you lean on me, but number two is to recognize that it's easy to preach about your faith when you're on the mountaintop. But how you know your faith is when you're crawling and walking through the valley. That sometimes in our life, it's easy to talk about how good God is when everything is going great in our life. But where we struggle the most is how am I walking through that valley? I love in the book of Corinthians, St. Paul spends 2 books, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians, dealing in large part about this issue, where people are just down. They're in a valley of sadness. Things are not going well in their life. And he writes this amazing book, and I want you to open up your Bibles to page 241 in your yellow Bibles that are found in the sleeves of your pews. And I just want you to listen to what he says. We're in the second column of page 241. We're looking at chapter 4, verses 8, and maybe some of you can feel like you're in this exact moment right here and right now. He says, we are often troubled, but we are not crushed. Sometimes we are in doubt, maybe even depression, but never in despair. There are many enemies that are coming against us, but we are never without a friend. And though badly hurt at times, depressed, having struggles, finding ourselves in the valley, we are never destroyed. At all times we carry in our mortal bodies the death of Christ, so that his life may be seen in our bodies, that throughout our lives we are always in danger of death for Christ's sake, in order that his life may be seen in our body. This means that death is at work in us, but life is always at work in you. In other words, what he's saying is, you find yourselves feeling down, you find stress and difficulties in your life, you find yourself being crushed, you're never out. That God would be saying to you and me, when you feel like you've got nothing left in this life, God has always something more for your life. And I want to give you 3 things to remember, that when I've got nothing, he's always got something. 3 things that I want you to walk through the valleys when you face them. Because in my heart, friends, I tell you this, you're either walking in a valley right now, you're about ready to go into a valley right now, or you're just coming right out of the valley right now. So let me give you 3 things that you should remember when you're in that valley. Here's number 1. When you're in the valley, remember that your faith is getting stronger. You know, I look at my own life, and as my 12 years of being the priest here at this community, I look at times that there was just simple mountaintop after mountaintop that we would experience. People that would come to me and say, Father Nick, I've been praying for a child to come, and we've been praying and nothing has happened, and then all of a sudden it happened by being at this church. That we were on a mountaintop when people would say that my marriage was about ready to fail, and then when we came to this church, we felt like God healed our relationship. That when you were feeding the hungry, that when you were going to the homeless kitchens, when you were helping the child at Wolfson's Children's Hospital that was battling cancer, you were on a mountaintop. But then I can remember times that I could be at the 100th anniversary of our church talking about how great our community is, while at the exact same time having my dad being rushed to the hospital and would never leave that hospital. We can have those high highs and that low lows, but what I want you to know is that in those moments, you need to know that your faith can get stronger. Like, you've got to recognize that in your world, it's great to love God when everything is on the mountain, but what you do is you get to know him when you're in those valleys. That when you travel the 22 inches from where your knees hit the ground and you say, God, I can't do this any longer. I just need you to guide me. I just need you to lead me. And some of you are trying to control all the difficulties in your life. You're trying to micromanage God. Can I give you a word of encouragement? Move over to the driver's seat of your life and let him take the wheel. He doesn't like to be a driver in the driver's seat. He doesn't like to be a backseat driver. He wants to lead your life. So give him the wheel. God, I'm just coming to you. I got a problem in my marriage. I got a problem in a relationship. I'm going through this difficult time. I just need you to guide me. Here's number 2. We know that we're going to get stronger in our faith. Number 2 is this: that when we walk through the valley, we know that God always wins. You know, when Christ was crucified, it was on a Friday. And many of you may realize this, but we celebrated the finding of the cross of Christ yesterday. And on Friday of that time, 2,000 years ago, everybody thought that Jesus Christ was done. They didn't even think that he was going to be alive, that no other person had ever risen from the dead, and that they were already counting him out. And even the disciples themselves the day after were in an upper room just going, oh my gosh, where is God? Because he wasn't showing up. They were worried and they were scared. But then Sunday came. And in life, you're going to have your Fridays where you're in that valley. But God always wins. And it may not be in the way in which you're expecting it, but one of the things I always tell myself is we are in a win-win situation. We're winning on this earth if we stay on this earth and help to change people's lives, but we also win in the kingdom of heaven. And let me just share with you this breaking news story. You're going to spend more time in the life to come than in this life. And how you live your life and how you deal with those valleys will determine how well you live in that new life that God has in store for us. Here's number 3. You get stronger in your faith. You recognize that He always wins. And then number 3 is your walk is your witness. Your walk through the valley is a witness to others who are going through the valley. Many of us remember with fondness Miss Margaret, a woman who's gone to be with the Lord several months ago. But can you ever remember a time when she was complaining? Whenever she was talking about what she was going through, not only her physical problems, but you have to know that Miss Margaret at times dealt with emotional problems as well. And every time you would talk to her about what she was going through, there was always this thing, glory to God. God is great. How many of us were made better Christians watching her walk through her valley? And my encouragement for you is to remember, people are watching. Can I just be honest with you? Some people will be moved by you telling them about how great God is in your life when everything is going great in your life. But you want to move people, truly move them to Christ, it's how you walk when you are in the valley and people are watching you. So I want to encourage you, make sure that you recognize that when you walk through the valley, people are watching. I leave you with this. I love working out in the yard. In fact, I love landscaping. If you were ever to talk to Roxanne, she'll tell you that Nick will go out there and work in the yard for hours and hours at a time. And oftentimes I write my sermons when I'm actually out in the yard, working in the yard. And in the Bible, it's quite interesting. I love the Bible because it almost covers every topic that you could ever think about. In fact, it talks about landscaping. Do you know that there are 35 trees that God uses to compare us to in the Bible? 35. The fig tree, the sycamore tree, the oak tree. In one part of the Bible, there's a tree called the mulberry tree. It's found in only a few areas right in what is called the Valley of Baca. And I gave you a book of Psalms, a paper from chapter 84 that's in your worship guide. You can look at it later. But in this Valley of Baca, there was these mulberry trees that are so interesting because what they are called to do is literally to cry. These are weeping trees that are constantly weeping sap. And so it says in this psalm, it says that people, he's talking to the Jewish people, as you're on your way to go to the Passover, which would later be on your way to see Christ crucified on the cross, you're going to walk through a tree that's crying. You're going to see it, but you're walking through it. Same thing in our own life. When we find struggles, when we're going through difficult times, you're not sitting there, you're walking through that valley. Then later on, he talks about this in the book of Psalms. He says that the righteous will flourish like another tree, a palm tree. 35 trees that are mentioned. You know what's interesting about a palm tree? If you're watching the news when Hurricane Dorian came through, almost every building was decimated. The one thing that was oftentimes vertical was a palm tree. Do you know how palm trees grow? Their fronds, their branches, are so much wider than their roots. Their root systems are very small. But a palm tree's root system grows only when wind is against it. Every time there is wind against it, it literally puts out its tentacles and grabs more of the sand. That's why it stays vertical every time that wind is coming against it. Can I just give you a word of encouragement? You are like that palm tree, and you are like the righteous, and that when you face the winds of life, when you find yourself in those valleys, you remember you're just walking through. When you walk through, you're getting stronger in your faith. When you walk through, you recognize that God always wins. That when you walk through, your walk is your witness. Because it's easy to preach about God on the mountaintop. But true faith is how you crawl and walk through the valley of life.
We invite you to join Father Nick and his wife, Dr. Roxanne Lowe, on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month for their Healthy Minds, Healthy Souls call-in show at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on Ancient Faith Talk.